At noon today, Senate leadership is expected to formally accept the articles of impeachment from the House. The articles will be delivered by the House impeachment managers. Those 7 lawmakers will act as prosecutors at President Trump's impeachment trial, which is expected to begin Tuesday. So Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill and is joining us this morning because there have been new developments overnight. I mean, there's developments every 10 minutes, it seems like, but new developments and new information overnight. And it has to do with Lev Parnas. We talked about this at the top of the hour. He is Rudy Giuliani's associate. He was essentially boots on the ground in Ukraine, his Ukraine Connect, if you will. And boy, he's talking and he has documents, right?
That's right. And his claims are pretty astounding. He is essentially saying that he was the point man in Ukraine for Rudy Giuliani and for the president himself, and that he was working on the president's behalf when he pressured the Ukrainians to open an investigation into the president's campaign rival, Joe Biden. And Parnas is really the first person to say that the president knew exactly what he was doing and supported it and wanted it. You've had other individuals like Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the EU, say that he inferred that this is what the president wanted, or this was his understanding after speaking to others. But here you have Parnas saying that he was taking direction from the president himself. Now, he says he never had a conversation directly with the president, but that he was getting his marching orders through Rudy Giuliani, and that he was told point blank, this is what Mr. Trump wants.
So Parnas has been making headlines for several months now. We've all talked about, his association with Rudy Giuliani. He's now facing criminal charges himself. Parnas is. Why are we just hearing about all of this now?
That is a great question, and that has led some Senate Republicans in particular to be skeptical of his claims. They say that Parnas is only providing all of this evidence because he's looking for leniency in his federal case for campaign finance violations. In fact, some have even questioned whether he is forging some of these documents. Rudy Giuliani told CBS News that he thinks that Parnas may have taken some of these handwritten notes in which he talks about telling the president of Ukraine to investigate the Bidens, that perhaps he wrote those notes later than he says he did. So there are some questions, and Democrats acknowledge that Parnas has some credibility issues. And that is going to be an interesting discussion going forward, because there are going to be some who say, look, he is now a central figure in this investigation. He should testify. We should hear everything that he says. Yes, he may have some credibility problems, but let's face it, usually individuals who are in the middle of a situation like this have credibility problems. Those are the kinds of people who would be willing to do something like this. On the other hand, you have Senate Republicans, even moderate Senate Republicans like Susan Collins, saying, why wasn't all of this evidence included in the House impeachment investigation? Why did they rush to complete it when things like this were out there? And should the Senate now bring someone like Parnas forward to testify?
Yeah, you're right. He wouldn't be the first person in the president's orbit with some credibility issues that lawmakers were still willing to listen to. So right. Even keeping that in mind, is this something that the president should be concerned about?
Absolutely. I think because Parnas is willing to make an accusation that others have been very careful to avoid. We saw some witnesses in the House impeachment process literally tie themselves in knots to try to claim that they didn't get this direction from the president himself, and that they just sort of somehow inferred that this is what they wanted. This is what he wanted them to do, was to go to the Ukrainians and repeatedly urge the Ukrainians to open an investigation into Joe Biden, as if this is something that they ever would have done without some pretty intense interest from higher ups. Mm-hmm. So I think that the fact that Parnas is saying this now is significant. The question is, are minds already made up? You've had a lot of Senate Republicans say that they don't believe what the president did was impeachable. They've been saying it for months. So the question is, will they be swayed by new evidence, given the identity of the messenger and given the timing?
All right, so let's talk about the history that is going to be made today. point 2.0 or part
Sure.
2 or whatever, because it was supposed to happen yesterday, and then the impeachment managers had to turn back around. So walk us through what's happening today, but also, what are we kind of looking out for? Because you see these little snippets of video, just looks like some lawmakers walking over. It doesn't look that interesting. So what are we kind of like tuning in for?
So those 7 House impeachment managers will once again make that ceremonial walk from the House to the Senate chamber this morning. They actually come over just before noon. They are going to deliver the articles of impeachment being carried there by the House clerk. Those articles will today be actually accepted by the Senate, and then the House impeachment managers will read the articles of impeachment aloud. They're about 9 pages long. They essentially lay out the case that the president abused his power and obstructed Congress. And then the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts, is going to be sworn in as the presiding judge in this Senate trial to come. And then he, in turn, will swear in all 100 senators who are going to serve as the jury. So a lot of pomp and circumstance today, some procedural moves, and then the opening arguments really get underway in earnest early to mid next week.
And just very quickly, what happened yesterday? The Senate wasn't prepared?
Well, the Republicans who lead the Senate essentially flexed their muscle and sent a message to the House, okay, we control the timing and the impeachment process from here on out. You don't get to decide when you deliver the articles of impeachment to us. We are now the deciders, and they're doing that after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi delayed the delivery of those articles for nearly a month. So this was a little bit of a muscle flexing moment for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. His aides claim that they're just following the protocol, which is that once they are aware that the House has the articles to hand over, then it is their job to formally invite the impeachment managers to come onto the Senate floor to deliver them. And they say they are inviting those House managers to come back today at noon and do so.